Nobody really talks about Generation X. We debate boomers, we analyze millennials, we dissect Gen Z endlessly. But there's a generation in the middle that rarely gets named, even though a lot of things quietly rely on it. They keep things moving without narrating it. They handle problems without making noise. They don't explain themselves unless they have to. You've seen them. Calm when other people panic. Reserved when others overshare. Uncomfortable with attention, even when they've earned it. That quiet presence isn't accidental. Generation X grew up in a world that didn't pause to check in, a world where attention wasn't guaranteed and support wasn't assumed. So instead of learning how to be expressive, they learned how to be functional. Instead of learning how to ask, they learned how to manage. Over time, that stops being a habit. It becomes a posture, a way of moving through the world. And once you see that pattern clearly, the rest of Gen X psychology starts to make sense, especially how early it began. For Generation X, independence didn't arrive as a lifestyle choice. It arrived as a necessity. Doors unlocked after school, hours to fill alone, small problems that couldn't wait for permission. There was no constant supervision, no one checking how it felt. If something needed to be handled, you handled it. If something went wrong, you dealt with the outcome. That kind of environment made them prepared. Generation X learned early that waiting wasn't reliable, that asking didn't always help, that problems didn't pause until someone noticed them. So they developed an internal system instead. Anticipate consequences. Think a few steps ahead. Don't assume backup. Psychologists later describe childhood environments like this as ones where cause and effect were immediate. Actions led straight to outcomes with very little buffer. That's why Gen X often looks unusually self-directed, why they trust their own judgment more than reassurance. But here's the part that often gets missed. When independence becomes the default that early, it stops feeling like strength. It starts feeling like responsibility. And once you've been responsible for yourself long enough, depending on others doesn't feel comforting. It feels risky. That single shift quietly explains how they started seeing the world around them. Generation X didn't grow up distrusting systems by default. They learned it. They watched adults promise stability and then lose it. They watched loyalty rewarded right up until it wasn't. They followed the rules and then saw the rules change anyway. Families broke apart. Jobs disappeared overnight. Institutions spoke with confidence and acted with confusion. So Gen X absorbed a quiet lesson early on. Effort doesn't guarantee protection. Promises don't guarantee outcomes. That's why they don't respond to titles. They respond to capability. If someone knows what they're doing, Gen X will follow without hesitation. If they don't, patience disappears fast. Some people call this outlook pessimism, but to Gen X, it's just pattern recognition. Hope quietly, plan defensively. It's not cynicism, it's adaptation. And once that adaptation sets in, it doesn't just change how you think, it changes what you choose to show. Generation X doesn't share much. Not because they don't have feelings, but because they learned early that visibility can be risky. They grew up in a time when mistakes stayed local, when embarrassment faded, when identity wasn't permanently recorded, so privacy became safety. That's why they don't broadcast their lives, why they don't narrate struggles in real time. Why humor and irony often appear where vulnerability might be expected. It's not emotional absence, it's emotional containment. They stay steady in crisis. They solve problems without noise. They help without announcing it. But there's a cost. When you're trained to self-regulate everything, asking for support can start to feel like failure. Studies on adult stress patterns suggest Gen X is less likely to seek help during difficult periods. Not because support isn't there, but because reliance feels uncomfortable. They can handle a lot, they always have. The problem isn't strength, it's what that strength quietly replaces. Generation X sits in a strange position, between analog and digital, between privacy and exposure, between scarcity and excess. They learn to adapt early. They learn to function without being asked how it felt. Bridges don't get celebrated, they get used. They carry weight so others can cross. They stay steady while everything else shifts. But durability has a cost. When you grow up learning not to need much, you stop expecting much. When you learn to carry yourself, you forget what it feels like to be carried. So the risk isn't collapse, it's a life that works without ever being questioned. Generation X isn't broken. It's carrying patterns that once kept it safe in a world that no longer needs the same armor. If this helped you understand Gen X a little better, subscribe. We share psychology like this regularly, quiet patterns explained clearly.